So this is our world building list of all the things we're going to be discussing. That's just some thoughts of the things we might end up talking about at one point or another. We probably won't talk about every single element of this during this particular time of world building that we're having these several weeks. We're going to just focus now on the ones that are the most relevant and necessary to focus on, but it's nice to have the list there for like the future as well, if we feel like there's something that, you know, definitely needs focusing on. I'm just going to get our Lore Bible up. Actually, I forgot to have that open, the Will Danville Lore Bible. This World Danville Lore Bible will be getting a few more articles and sections added to it soon as well, because now we've been doing lots of world building. There's a few things we've set in stone together, and such as the timeline of history from the beginning of time till now, present day. That's going to go in there. We've already got the calendar in there, although it's got to be filled out with all those cool festivals we've got here in the poll. And that's going to stay up for ages. We'll probably add more when we go back to festival talk. And of course our Pantheon as well, that we're doing today. Oh my goodness, go away, burbs. Alright. There's a couple more I want to add to this world building list before we start. There's a couple more things that weren't added that are important. And I'm going to put the first one here. Magic. That is something that wasn't on the list. So magic will be on the list now, and that's probably actually going to be the next thing we discuss after the Pantheon and this whole segment, because there was a couple of times it came up for discussion in chat last stream, and there's things that I've kind of set in stone myself behind the scenes, a few thoughts that are really exciting, and I'm looking forward to bringing them up to you guys when we do have the magic stream, and we can sort of bounce even more ideas off each other when we talk about that. For now, we're not going to talk about magic today. Of course, we'll have a whole stream dedicated to that, but just letting you know that it's on the cards to end up talking about that very shortly. And hi, forgotten how you do today. It's awesome to see you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. How are you? How has your week been? And the other thing that I remember that's really important to talk about as well, that isn't on this list, is, and this came to my mind, the races. Each of the races, each of them in depth, because they'll all have their own profile, article page each on the Lore Bible. That's the goal. Because we haven't really had a chance to really explore each of the races' history yet, and really talk about what they're like and what they stand for, their values, and obviously important figures that through history and present day as well with them. That's something to eventually discuss. I think doing it after the Pantheon and magic streams is probably best, because I know when we did the Pantheon today, that's going to help inspire what some of the races are going to end up being like, because each of the Pantheon kind of represent the races. We're having like a diversity in it, and how we shape these gods is going to largely have an effect on what the races are like themselves as well, and their like attitudes and ways of life. So that, I think that will give, what we're doing today will give us a bit of insight and information to what they can be like when we eventually have their in-depth streams. So I think they're going to be like the next things that are coming up. Along with like this as well, I can see us we're creating NPCs together from history. the link to this when we talk about it. It's cold, so I'm really glad I'm wearing this sweater today, because it is a bit of a chilly one actually. How's your day so far, Rose? Going well, forgotten. Other than being a little bit chilly, I'm good. I'm a bit peckish as well, but I've got no chocolate left. Boo. Boo. Have to have my chocolate. So now we've got those on there. And obviously it'll be a great idea to get really specific about the like fall and everbloom areas. We talk about some of these things as well. Okay. First, the timeline, because I did add a bit more extra detail onto this yesterday, or it might have been Tuesday night, before we jump back into the Pantheon chats. I have a bit more idea now. I mean, I was really happy with the timeline as it was, but there's a few more additions. I have a bit of a clearer idea of when each of the races came into being now, and sort of who they've descended from. I think that's really cool to think about, because it adds a bit of realism and really interesting history. And also a clear idea of their lifespans as well, from the order of who came first. And I think naturally the ones that came earlier are going to have longer lifespans than the ones that came after. So we're going to talk about now, because there's some really interesting things for sure about this, and a big announcement, guys. Some of you might be surprised. Some of the races have new names, and yes, normally I'd do a poll for this. Like, I love doing polls because they're awesome. But there was a few names that got sent over to me. I'm personally terrible at coming up with names, so I'm a bit. It takes me some time to find the right ones. But these got sent to me, and I just immediately latched onto them and was like, okay, these are just great. So I've gone for them, and I hope you guys like them too. It might take a bit of time for us to get used to them, and it might seem a bit weird at first because we're so used to the old names. But these ones are far less generic, and I think they add a lot to personality, and they're also very easy as well to kind of relate to who is who. I have already updated the website, the NBC forms with the new race names, so anyone who's super observant will have already noticed. And we can have a quick look at those, we can have a quick overview, then I'm going to go through the lifespans and a bit more detail of each of the races, and then we'll go into talking about the Pantheon, because we can't really decide much else about the gods thoroughly without knowing a bit of history of their specific race. It will just make it a bit more easier to build each of those legends, gods' histories, once we've talked a bit about the races. But we'll have a proper in-depth race stream for each of the races, maybe next week, perhaps, along with a magic stream. And hi Secondhand, how are you doing? And it's a national holiday here, by the way, no work day. Oh, really? Forgotten? Where are you based again? I remember you saying. I know it wasn't over here, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't the US either. So I'm very curious about this holiday. And hi Secondhand, just dropping in from World Anvil to let you know you can sync your Discord and World Anvil account to open up more support options and info channel on the Discord in your account settings. Sorry to interrupt, but don't think I can contact Biden. Oh, that's fine Secondhand, I appreciate you coming in and letting me know that. I'll actually have a little look into that after stream for sure, so thanks for giving me a heads up. Yes, my DMs are actually closed because things got a bit crazy at some point or another, and for our own sanity, us creator folk have to sometimes close them, right? And hi Rex, Carlos Handsome, how are you doing today? So good to see you, I hope you're well. And yes, if I get a bit stuck, I'll throw in a message on the Discord, but no worries about interrupting, the streams are always for chats. After all, questions and all ideas and all that fun stuff. I'm from Greece. Oh yeah, that was it, forgotten. I remember now. I had a feeling it was somewhere in Europe, but I couldn't quite remember where. Totally understandable, yay. Alright, so Yes, as I just announced, the races had a bit of an upgrade. The humans and elves are the same names because they're very accessible, and it would feel weird having human and elves named as anything else, personally. The fairies are just Fae. I think Fae is a really great name, and that's sort of short for fairy anyway. It just sounds cool. And it was the ones that really ultimately needed the change the most was Neko. That was the big one, because it's a bit the Japanese trope of, well, it's actually the Japanese word of cat, isn't it? It kind of has a bit too many weeb associations to it, which is, I don't know if it fit with Raindrop Chronicles, the name Neko. We got our own cat name now, and it's better than Makote or Maquote or however Final Fantasy call them, Final Fantasy 14. And the reptiles and the doggos and cats have had the name changed too, because they were fine. Like, reptiles is fine, and canines and felines were fine, but a little bit slightly uninspiring perhaps, and a little bit lazy, but they worked at the time because that's what they are, right? But it's always fun to like think a bit deeper and make them sound cooler and a little bit more, creative. So here they are, they're here. So if you want to look, folks, feel free to look at the website, because you can look at the form closer and have a nosy, but I'm just giving you a quick heads up on the changes. And this is who they are. I've actually put them in order of the lifespan. Yes, that's correct. The dragons, well, they aren't actually dragons, but they're going to be the descendants of dragons. That is kind of the plan. Because let's go through this timeline first of all, before we get into the detail. We sort of said that in the Age of Gods, that was when elves and fae came about. They're like the third group of people. Before then, we had the seconds and the first, which weren't really humans, really. The first was just balls of magic, and basically the sun and moon, to put it clear. And the seconds are basically jellyfish. Basically just very thin beings with very thin skin, and jellyfish is a good imagery to sort of attach to that. And humans themselves, well, not humans, because they're not, elves and fae are not humans, of course, but humanoids, should I say, didn't even come around until this age here. And we figured, that suits, because the fae and elves are kind of, there's something about them that it's just more legendary than any of the other races. And dragons are also a really legendary race, and this is a really random one, but the reason for that is because it ties into the beast races having an ancestor, right? Because we got this skin thing, but that doesn't just mean like flesh skin. That could mean scaly skin, and also furry skin. So these seconds could have had like scaly skin and furry skin, which would eventually have evolved, I guess, into those. Because the reptiles and the furry beast races wouldn't have just come out of thin air. It's good to have a little bit of solid background detail, that they came from something, and it only makes sense that it's creatures just as equally legendary as elves and fae that fit with that time period and suit. And dragons, you can't get more legendary than that, and they've sort of already been established in the game anyway. But Tristan's profile and Kitsune, they are a great mix of cat and dog. Foxes are a great combo of cat and dog, so it kind of makes sense that a cat race and a dog race would have come from such a thing, something that has a bit of both in them. And I wasn't expecting you. Yes, that's the twist, Matt. Because I wasn't thinking that either at first. We had a bit of a chat last stream, or was it the stream before? And I was sort of speculating the idea of reptiles having the shortest. But when you think about it, especially now that the ancestors are dragons, they're far too badass to live so shortly. And I wasn't sure at first. I was like, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more I like the idea of humans not being OP, in all honesty. And I want to talk about that in the magic stream that's coming up as well, because I kind of am seeing it as the ones that are born first and arrived and formed the earliest are kind of attached to magic the most. They have they're more in tune with magic, should I say, than the ones that come earlier, which would mean that elves, fae would be most in tune with magic, the beast races after that, and then humans the least, which we'll talk more about another time, because that is such a deep topic in itself that it's a discussion for an entire stream. But let's go down. This was the Age of Stars, when the natural disaster happens and people thought the world was ending because of what happened to the moon and stars suddenly formed. And this is a great time period where just everything went to chaos, and probably the time when monsters and wild animals appeared on the earth as well. I'm trying to think in real depth here, and because then it came to me, well, animals in general, as soon as the beast races and an ancestor for them come to mind, it was also, what about other wildlife in general? And it kind of works that they came around during a world that, because everything just changed from this point on. I see this as the age where things changed. Before then time was pretty ancient and probably wasn't measured on calendars either. They might have not even had a concept of time in this period. But from this point on, things, this is when, people actually, the first men come about after this, shortly after as well. So life as we know it begins to form eventually, and there was speculation of the vampire curse beginning here as well. So that was really cool. I think that would link in really well with that. We're going to talk about that more in a bit. And the beast race is coming first, and then the Neko, which are now renamed to Kit. So they are descendants of the furry kitties, the real furry ones, which makes sense as well, because they are half cat, half human, and humans come afterwards. So it was good to get a clear idea of who came first and who comes last. At first, humans were sort of here, and then the beasts were down here when I was first planning this. But then when, the thought of dragons being the beasts, the reptiles' ancestors came to mind, it was like, well, actually, they should be the ones that come first. Because the humans, out of all these legendary beasts, the humans are the ones that are the odd one out, really. And the humans descended from Kit then? Maybe. I guess you could say they could be. It makes sense. They're sort of, I see them just as something that, they're a bit of everything, I guess. They're like everybody else coexisted together, the beast races, and then the Kitka form from the cats. The Kit come from the Kitka. I've got to get used to these names myself. I'll probably still be calling them reptiles and canines, etc. and that for a long time, just like I still keep calling Violet Rose. But we'll get used to it eventually. And so that is something to speculate on And I think it could be possible. We could see it like that, or we could see it as they sort of came from everybody, and they're like the weak race in a way, the ones that are not as in tune with their magic and have the shortest lifespans. But their lifespans will still be 70-80 years, the same as it is on planet Earth, I'd say. I think it's a good idea to keep it as close to humans as we know them as possible, so they're relatable and we can still have elderly folk in the game. We don't want to shorten it to 40 years or something for humans. It's interesting, and I think it could make the protagonist's journey more interesting as well. The fact that you as a hero play as a human, that's the choice, the only race you can be. I mean, it was purely because I didn't want too many assets. That was a big reason why you could only play as a human. But now it's actually giving a bit of narrative as well, because the story could be about the journey of being a human in this world as well. It's also quite interesting to have the beast races have a slightly longer lifespans than the humans, because it also gives a reason for why the humans would be jealous of the reptiles and perhaps other beast races too, because they have an advantage over them with lifespan. Now, of course, they can still die from injury or being murdered, as anyone can. They're not immortal. I'd say 150 years, maybe double a human's lifespan for a beast race. And elves and fae, 200 years plus perhaps. But as for the ones that lived in the age of gods, they probably had even longer lifespans still, because they're legendary dragons and etc. Because the elves and faes of today, in the age of the first men, are ancestors of the elves and fae from here, so they're probably not quite as powerful as these guys, but still very, very much superior to anything else that's on the planet. And everyone, hi Storm, how you doing? It's so good to see you. We're rambling on about real in-depth stuff here. Our world building is starting to get complex. We've got a timeline here, but everything's going to be on the Lore Bible in due course, and it's going to be presented as tidily as possible. So that is about it really. Everything else is very much the same. And I guess you could see the sentient objects as the next age of people that come after the humans. So really the humans are only just a bit better than sentient objects. But it's an interesting twist, because in a lot of fantasy things, humans are mostly superior to other races, and the beast races are the ones that are the weak ones. But I like the idea of taking a spin on that and actually making the beast races a bit more superior than the actual humans. And actually this being a struggle of humans struggling a bit more in this world, and things not necessarily coming easy for them. I think in some ways, it kind of makes fun of humans because they're the weakest, but also it could make humans more likeable as well, because we'll kind of see their struggles potentially, some of them. And of course there'll be some bitter humans that probably get jealous and envious and will hate them, the ones that are like that. But so other humans, will be like, I personally can relate to the vulnerable more, so I might start liking humans a bit more, knowing that they're slightly weaker race now. And ever since I saw that, I missed the first part of the Pantheon. I got kind of sad, so I had to get to this as history gods and my drive. Awesome, Stormwell, it's awesome that you've made it. That's fantastic. So it's an exciting time for sure, and I've definitely got ideas in mind. I think this project started as a very sort of random, just disorganised bit of funding it back in the day, but as time's gone on, I've started to get more concepts and more idea of how the story itself and lore can be built, and I think that's great, because then you're going to end up with a more solid overall story that has structure to it. So over time, the direction's definitely got more structured for this game and its story, but I still keep a bit that community driven sort of focus, in the way that getting feedback from the community and doing polls and having brainstorms and coming up with things together when necessary and when there's a time to. And a lot of settings struggle with getting humans as a distinct trait, and just making them the weakest is an interesting approach. Yeah, that's kind of why I've latched on to it, because as soon as the idea, because it wasn't even a thought at first, we sort of just thought, yeah, the beasts are the weakest, didn't we? But as when I was messing about with the timeline and realised that reptiles could come from dragons, and it suddenly makes the reptiles much better and more powerful than they were before having dragons as an ancestor, because they're epic, right? And although they're nowhere close to as powerful and as strong as dragons would have been, they still have the dragon blood in them. And it just didn't make sense with that as a thing. Dragons being the history of the reptile race, the Dwarfs, which I think is a great name because it's just a shortened version of dragon, it just wouldn't have made sense if they were the weakest, when humans are the ones that actually are lacking the ancestors. And as soon as that idea settled in my mind, I was like, yeah, this could be an interesting theme to explore, actually, a game and a story where humans are actually not quite as powerful and actually struggle more in this world and lack advantages that the other beasts have, such as being able to use magic. And I'm really excited for the magic stream, because of course there's humans already in this world who have profiles, such as Mordecai the sorcerer, and he's a human, but one thing about him that his profile does say is that he's a terrible sorcerer. So that's, that could totally be workable. Nobody is going to be like a human and great at magic in this world. They have to go to extreme lengths, like Raidu's character, for example, if they want to be a magic user. Like Raidu's character is an elemental blade master, and he uses magic in a different way to the traditional way of using it, which happens to work great. I mean, that was how his character was anyway. We haven't even had to adapt him to make it fit with that lore. It's like that anyway. And there was a thought that I would add a third class to the hero, the protagonist, because we've currently got warrior and hunter. And I did say I'd add a third. It was a big question mark because it's more work and more assets and more skill trees. So I wasn't 100% sure I'd add a third. I mean, I did think it might have been mage, but it's more likely going to be thief if there's going to be a third, I think. Because keeping the human hero as a non-magic DPS character is probably going to be the best way to go. And that would nicely complete the triad if we had warrior, hunter and thief as our choices for who you can play as. We don't have a thief playable class in the game, so there's definitely a slot for that, like a roguey thief sort of character. But still a question mark about the third class for a hero at this point in time, because it would be extra work, of course, and it would be something I'd add in a much later alpha build of episode 1 if it was going to be added. It wouldn't be added in the first one because there's already a lot to do, so it'd be a much later addition. Okay, so now we've talked about that. I'm glad we got that down, because that's going to be really important for moving on to, now we know a bit of history, then it'll help us decide better what period in time these legends might have rose. and came into being, I guess, because we already know that these first two Fey and Elven gods that were already it's a little bit fleshed out, but not quite. We already knew they would have been from the very early age of the Age of Gods. Whereas I imagine that these guys might have definitely come from the Age of First Men. Well, they've got to have done, because they wouldn't have existed before then. And then we've got one there who's the Age of Stars. And today's stream's going to be out filling out the other boxes for these characters, all 6 of them, and sharing just some thoughts and ideas about what these gods could be like and things that could have happened. But before we move on to that, I'm thinking of just very quickly making a new page. Insert page break, and just putting lifespans here, so we can just set in stone an idea for their lifespans, each of the races, because we speculated a bit on that last stream, had some thoughts, and a few streams ago we talked about it as well, but nothing was set in stone and decided for good. So I'll get them down on the list first. So in order, so Elf and Fae. Now, not one of them is more powerful than the other. I'd say Elves and Fae are probably considered equals, but obviously someone has to come first. And then we have, who do we have? Let me review the list. We got the Dra next, who used to be reptiles, but now a Dra, a shortened form of dragon. Then we have the Walker, which was inspired by Wolf, of course, and with Car at the end, because it fits great, the names, with what the legends used to call themselves, like the very old people from the Age of Gods. There's this naming convention where elves called themselves Sarf and Dar and Ra and Ka. So the inspiration for having unusual names is just so we can make it clear how the world was completely different in this age from the modern times. Because in the modern times, everybody just has normal fantasy names from the Age of First Men onwards. They'd have probably just called themselves, you know, not Bob or anything that common, but, you know, just normal fantasy names. Whereas it's definitely a little bit more unusual in this age because it just makes it cool and a bit more mysterious sounding than if they just had shows the difference in change. And then oops. So I'll put the plurals there. Don't know why we got elf there twice. There we go. Dwarfs have been cut, by the way. I'm not going to never say never for them, but they kind of just were forgotten and left behind, and nobody had them as a community character. So it's hard to find, and because no one's picked them, it's hard to find a place for them in this world now as well, especially now we've built this timeline of history. They feel like they'd just be shoved in if we had them, and not every fantasy story can have every race. So we got this 7, and let's see what you guys have said. Like, even in fantasy, there are two big differences in magic users. People who use their own power and magic they need to have innate or gain powers, or use spells or magic in general, but there is also magic users which poses little or no magic themselves, yet they channel the power and magic of nature and familiars. Yeah, I'll copy and paste and take that forward into the magic stream when we have it next week. Because there's definitely a little bit of a foundation and thoughts that I have for the magic and how it could work, but there's definitely going to be some points for discussion for sure, and some interesting things to sort of figure out together about it. Thief as a player class reminds me, in one chat game I've been playing, a friend's character is a not thief and they're not the thief's guild because there is no thief guild. Yeah, thief is an interesting class, and I've always thought, you know, I'd like the idea of adding a third choice for the hero for a class, not just warrior and hunter, just to complete the triad. Mage was definitely one that was on the agenda, but because we're sort of making humans not be in touch with magic in this world, it wouldn't really work. But thief is great because I think it's a thing, isn't it? They say there's the triad of fighters, and you've got warrior, and I think the other one's ranged, and the other one's actually thief. So that's a nice, very different choice for three to choose from. So, we'll just roughly do this. We won't spend too much time on this, but we'll just get some thoughts in on what the lifespans could be. And I believe on our planet, humans do live for around about that, right? I think that's the average. So we'd keep that as this in this world. I was thinking that all the beast races, it'd be cool if there was about double what the humans are. I think them being able to live the life of two human generations is a good balance. And I think maybe Kit could be in between. So something like 99 or 100 years for a Kit, aka Neko. It's kind of cringy thinking that we kept the Neko name. I mean, no offence to the whole weeb culture, I love it. But it's nice to kind of make our game have a bit of something a bit distinct and original for that race, rather than just all out copying how Japan do it. Now, for Fae and Elves, I'm kind of debating maybe between 200 and 300 years. So I think it's good to just have this in mind for when we, go into talking about the races in depth, each of them, and make an article for each of them in the Lore Bible and think their history. Because I'm a bit of a blank on these races, we're starting to get the ideas of what they're going to be like, and but there's certainly things to decide about them, like traits and common traits. I'm not a fan of stereotypes and putting races all into one box, because you get different in all, right? Not every draw is going to be bloodthirsty, for example, and not every kit is going to be devious. But I suppose there's going to be common traits that they followed and their cultures have latched onto. So it'll be interesting to think of that and come up with and make up some important figures and people together as well. Because all that stuff, even if the game only sees 5% of it, it's cool having it all there and all that lore built, because it's going to just make it easier to write dialogue and have things that NPCs could say to each other and talk about and those kind of things. So let's just catch up with chat before we can, because I see you've said loads. Oh my goodness. I wanted to, and I know you guys have probably said anything that's really interesting bit of lore insight that you say that I might not talk about much on stream. I usually go through the VOD and keep a note of anything anyway, and then I'll bring it up again potentially in a relevant stream. And Forgotten says, I wanted to ask you a question about vampires, Rose. I don't want to get off topic from what you are doing right now. Oh, no worries, Forgotten. I mean, vampires are going to be a subject to discussion today anyway, because we're going to be moving on to the Pantheon again very shortly. And one of those gods is a vampire, a secret vampire. So it's definitely going to be relevant, because we'll be talking about this character a lot. And like a lot of fantasy games, animes and stuff that general think about humans, they might be weak, but they can conjure, make friends, and cover each of their weaknesses and stuff. And to elves, 2 years fade after our 1 million. Walker 70 years, kick 10 times 9. Human 30 seconds. Those most suggest that's hilarious. You know, now you've mentioned that, I know it was like clearly a joke, but that concept is actually really interesting. Like, imagine someone who only lived 30 seconds. Like, I'm curious what that sort of story would be like for someone that lived. What would they do? What would they do? Just wake up, eat not something nice, and then die? Probably. Fantasy trope is like warrior, priest, hunter, and rogue thief. Interesting. I think it was a TV tropes article I read. I'll get it up at some point when the time's right. But all the classes on the one I read, the 3 in the triad, were all sort of like not melee DPS, but they were all kind of DPS. I don't think any of them were magic ones or healers. I'm pretty sure it was hunter, warrior, and thief, but it might just be me wishful thinking, because that's how we're going to do it in our game. And Neko Embedded also says, nothing to be flushed or ashamed about, just Japanese word for cat. Yeah, I mean, it's great and I love it, but I feel like we're sort of being uninspired by using common race names that are so set in stone. And that's why I think it's great that we've sort of been a little bit more creative and not just calling the reptiles just reptiles anymore, and we've actually got a fancy name for them now. Jasneko is more known foreign words for cat due to anime culture. Walker is practically in the same boat as the word for wolf in different language. Oh really? Is that a word for something else? I gave each of them a Google to see if there was any other media that already used those terms, and I think Walker was a city in Poland, I think. I remember Googling it. Oh yeah, it's actually a city in Poland, I believe. Interesting. But yes, Walker is short for wolf, and obviously Kitka is like, well, not short for wolf, but you know, it's inspired by wolf. Kitka's inspired by kitten, and it's called Kit because it sounds like cat. Okay, so there we go. That's a good estimate for now, and we'll go for that and see how it goes. But other than that, is there anything else we could do with doing before we jump into the Pantheon? Let me just think. Okay, I think that's it. I think we can jump into the Pantheon now. Just the lifespans I wanted to get down, and I just wanted to also mention those things first about the races that I've figured out and between now and the last stream. But here we go, fun times, back to our legends, and we can see them all, can't we? Oh no, they're chopped off. I spent like about 10 minutes before the stream getting it perfect so that they'd show on the screen. We can just do this. Oh, I know why it's gone funny. It's because I'm slightly zoomed in. There we go. It's all fitting perfectly now. I hope you can all see that text. I know that my little window on Slobs is small, a bit smaller than what you guys can see, so it looks super small to me on the preview window, but I'm sure on the actual window it's not that small. Russian word read, it says what? Oh really, that's good. I like the idea of definitely being inspired by real life inspiration for names, because I think it's very important that people latch on to these and immediately know what it is. Like if you see Dra, I think it's not too impossible to imagine that that's a shortened form of dragon. And I think if you saw those names, cat and dog, it might take a bit of time at first to realise what they are, but then once you connect them to the dog species and the cat one, I think it can stick in the mind quite well. Because if you have something a bit too unusual, it can take it's like, I always thought the word Makote for the Neko race for Final Fantasy 13 was a bit of an odd one personally, because I can't even pronounce it for a start or spell it. But it's so I'm personally definitely a fan of the more minimal and more simple, but still being a bit creative and not too common. And a wolf is called that because it says woof. Yeah, and Met, also what your idea for the other day when you said that the wolf god, their people, let me find the notes. If there was a legendary dog person, that star could be what dogs howl at instead of the moon. That was pretty interesting, and I want us to definitely talk about each of these in detail today. Any of them, it doesn't matter what order or who we talk about first, we can talk about them all, because there could be some really cool ideas for that. I liked that idea of their supporters, their followers, worshippers howling at the wolf monument, for example, or just their star in the sky, because that's what they are, the brightest stars instead of the moon. All those little behaviours and things that the people do can just help make things feel a bit more realistic and really interesting. So I'm thinking of taking that idea forward for that particular god. And I did what you suggested actually in the ideas discussion channel, because originally we had the Walker as a male and the Kit as a female, but it's true, the whole gender stereotype with cats and dogs, with dogs being male and cats being girls, is a little bit cliche. So I was a fan of swapping them round, which I didn't actually think at the time, but it makes sense. So I think we've got a pretty decent balance there of genders. We've even got a non-binary thrown in. I think the Fae definitely suits that one. And we've got their virtues as well that we've sort of planned, because it's kind of cool to make these all very different if we can. Like all positive gods that have done good, but in different ways. I've already got a name for two of them, and I just immediately just latched onto these ones immediately because of what they mean. Holiday, and that's sounds like holiday when you pronounce it. And that's a rest day. Well, not really a rest day, but a day of enjoyment and holidays. And this one is the day of rest and healing. So they're going to be the two rest days of the week. And these four are going to be probably working days, I'd say. But we're a bit of a blank on what the days should be called and what the legends should be called right now. But I'm thinking we can think of names last if necessary. But the thing with the names, I know Trees Day got suggested, which was an interesting one, but I think it's also a challenge, but also important to make sure each of the days are global, could be celebrated globally. Trees Day or something like that would be great. Forever Bloom and Lake Fall alone, but globally, it's these days of the week are a global thing all over the world. And although there probably could have been old calendars from when there was different gods around, who knows? I'm only having this sort of concept really about maybe there was different gods at different points in times, just to keep things open to us in case there needs to be another figure that was important that we haven't slotted in. So but keeping it just as the 6 is a nice number, and that happens to be how many days of the week they are, so it fits nicely. But it'd be great, it'd be great if these other 4 have like, you know, a link like to their god, like how the day is celebrated and what it's celebrated for, whether it's a day of rest or you know, something else, because we're probably not going to have any more days of rest because we've already got those, but having it link with the names I think is cool. So that's the hard bit though, making it link. So when something springs to mind, it's hard to not want to have it, because it's like, yeah, that works, but it can be hard to actually think of the name. That's the challenge. So, of course, these legends here, these three in particular, won't have unusual names that end in Sa or Da, because they're going to be from the age of the first men. So that's when things started getting a bit more modern then. So they could just be called, you know, Bob for all we know. I don't know why I always say Bob, but it's not going to be Bob. We're not going to have Bob. Of course, it's too common. And let's catch up with chat. And Forgotten said... I wanted to ask, have you thought if vampires are a natural race or people born of a vampire, they're made into one via a curse or voluntary by ritual of some sort? Oh, okay, forgotten. So the answer to that is an easy one. They are not natural. They're not a race. They were actually cursed. So vampires are a curse in this world. Violet is a vampire, but she was originally just a normal farmer girl who has minded her own business, just a normal gal, your everyday gal, and the curse just came upon her one day, and there's going to be a bit of extra backstory on that, because I was having to think about that as well, a little bit of vampire backstory, so I might mention that in a sec actually, because we've got this elf vampire to talk about, so we'll bring that up as well today. So our goal is to just fill all these in today and hopefully get all the boxes, the most important ones, filled anyway. So one important one that we do have is their act of greatness. That's the big one that's going to have a lot of info in it, because that's really going to be what made them famous. Let me catch up with chat first before I start my rambles though. And maybe the furry cat should be named something that sounds like Ra, and while the less powerful cats could have a name that sounds like Purr. Right, so you mean which name, as in like their actual god name? Let's I mean, we do have Kit. We don't have a Kitka god, but that's because we've only got room for 6. So, but I feel like the Kit one is kind of Kitka anyway, because they're part of the same family. So I think we got a nice diverse selection. But yes, like the name bit is the bit that I struggle with, and but that's what I'm saying. If we can't think of any, we can wait a bit. But if you guys come up with any and any inspire you, then feel free to say, and I will put them in an iPad file, and we'll see what we end up having. But we can be a little bit more flexible with the names of these ones for sure, because they're from the age of the first men. They don't have to follow a naming convention of the old days like these ones would have to, where it ends in Sa and Da. But I just love the Da one because it sounds like holiday. I'm silly. But let's get that in. Let's just get that they were from the age. Oh no, why does it do that? Paste special, paste values only, that's it. And that would be the age of the first man. The fruit man, oh my goodness, I've got the fruits on my mind. There's another option for race. Oh yeah, well that's fine. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of already attached to what we've got, but you know. Okay, so let's go see when the age of first man was. 6,000 years ago. So, and they might have not came right at the start, we can edit that, because the age of the first man was quite a long period of time that spanned from 6,000 years ago to 600 years ago. So I'll actually edit that to 600. To 6,000, because it could have been any in between the two. Okay. And this reminds me of one thing in League of Legends. There is Ursai religion, so to say, people who devote themselves to the almighty god of Storm Volibear, who believes humans should be primal and return to basic instincts like hunting, killing, and the biggest believers, they slowly transmograte into horrific monsters that resemble bears, but some have two mouths, 3 legs or spikes, so it could be something even similar with the wolf god. Awesome. So I'm going to just copy that, because we will be talking about the wolf god in a bit, and I might need to have a reread of that one, as I always do. With power of wolf god, allows them to be like werewolves but make it more spicy, can be horrific mutations of what werewolves actually are. Yeah, the werewolf thing is definitely complex in this world, because the moon doesn't function as it normally does. So the whole full moon thing and how werewolves traditionally are wouldn't be how it is, but I'm sure we can be quirky about how that would happen. But you know, that's werewolves are another thing altogether. I do believe they're a thing, because one of our druid class sort of wanted to make their character a werewolf, so they do exist. But I think I see them as a sort of sub race off the dog race, and I think Wolvikin was actually their name. So what the new name we've given, Walker and Wolvikin, actually go quite well together. But yeah, Wolvikin are like a sub-race, I think, that's sort of seen off that, which isn't really talked about, because it's not one of the main races we've set in stone, but it could exist and could be a thing with a few odd people in the world. But I'd say that there's, like, you know, quite a lot of Walker, but less Wolvikin. Okay, so the next thing. Okay, so I wanted to make an extra dock. And add just something to this, because one cool thing that we're going to add in is act of greatness for each of them. So list of great deeds. I want to start making a list of great deeds together that, you know, big things. Has to be like world changing. Has to be world changing. Because these gods made a difference to the world. That's why they're in the Pantheon, because of what they did while they was alive. It can't just be something as simple as bought some food for someone. So the things that are like literally huge, like save an entire city, which I sort of latched onto with this god, because this god is the Fae god, and we know we've got a sky city that is going to be hugely populated with Fae and some elves, and Met came up with the idea of a lifting day to celebrate the day the city was lifted, because we know at one point in time that city probably wasn't in the sky, and somebody would have been the one to have put that city into the sky for one reason or another. So I figured that this guy, just briefly add here, saved the let's think of how to write this so it actually works well. Raise the Sky City. Okay, but there has to be a reason why they raise the Sky City. So looking at this person here, they're a healer. And they were around in the same time. And their monument is the Lakefall Tree today. So if they were around at the same time, we could make them work hand in hand. Maybe there was raised Sky City to save it from. There was obviously going to be something bad happening if they would have raised it to go to these lengths. Across the world. So raised Sky. Oh, I hate it how it does that. There we go. Raised Sky City to save it from a plague spreading across the world. And the reason why I've said that plague spread across the world is because I figured this guy could have maybe cured the plague, because they lived at the same time, so then it ties those in together. But they did different things, like they did different acts. Like this one did something very courageous, because that really links into the courage, which is important. Someone who isn't courageous wouldn't have done such a thing. And this one's more about being a really knowledgeable healer and how he's wise. That's why we linked the tree to this one, because of the wisdom aspect. And the healing sort of thing just really fit with that. So that kind of works for those, and it feels just right to make it has to be something big, these lists of great deeds. So curing a plague and saving a city are like just two examples, which we already have, so we can cross them out now because we've already sort of given it to them. But as for the others, that's what I want to think about great deeds they could have done. Literally humongous, epic things. But these people were like nothing like supernatural or like epic. They were just ordinary folk that just did something great, right? In the moment, a bit like Bilbo Baggins. So what was it going to... Yeah, because he's a mage as well, which works nicely. Obviously, Faes are going to be great magic users. They're going to be in touching magic because they were one of the first races. And I assume someone who's a mage would have the ability to probably raise the Sky City. That could go on to being something that celebrated the day that it was saved, and could land on holiday, the holiday day of the week, and that works and ties in that character nicely with that. Tetsu, sorry I'm late, was napping. Welcome. How you doing, Tetsu? I hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for that sub. Oh my goodness though, 39 months. That is a long time. You're one of our longest subs, Tetsu, so I super appreciate the support. I'm going to give you a bit of hype in chat. How are you doing? I hope your nap was good. And well, I was wondering if it was the same time or not, since given how long Fae live, Haladar's act of greatness could be during a different age than their birth, especially if the city was threatened during the changing of ages. Yeah, like for sure it could have been a different time because it was a humongous period, you know. I'm sure like between the age of gods and the age of stars, that's 4k years. But considering the lifespans of these people, like modern day elves and Fae live for, we say, 200-300 years, right? These guys were the very first Faes and elves, so they probably would have lived even longer. So chances are, like a normal lifespan, yeah, the odds of them living at the same time are tiny. But these folks could have totally lived through most of the age of gods and have known each other. And that's why it felt right to sort of link these two together, and link their achievements in with the other. And I think that fits nicely in with the characters that we've sort of got here and what they stand for. But as for the others, the age of the first men is an even longer period of time, I believe, 6k years, 6,000 to 6k. And the lifespans of the Walker, Kit and Dra are like 150 years, so these ones could definitely be more spread and might have not known each other. And this guy, the vampire elf, you know, probably in a different generation to these two as well. They might have been long dead by the time this guy was around. If lifespans have shortened that much, no wonder people thought the world was ending. Yeah, I mean, it all connects. That event of the moon is definitely like going to be such a huge natural disaster in history, and their lifespans probably could have shortened greatly. I imagine like monsters appeared then, the vampire curse arose then, nights went much darker, there was loads of flooding probably, tons of people died, lifespan shortened, and eventually the first men came about. It's all a big mess. People back then would have been freaked out by the change. And the question is, what's the biggest disaster, right, out of what happened during the Age of Stars and the Fading Stars disaster? Because this is a bad thing as well, but this one's a lot more subtle. Like the Age of the Fading Stars and when the stars stopped changing would have been something that wasn't noticed quite immediately. It was more of a less dramatic, slightly natural disaster perhaps, that obviously would have terrible consequences. I think it's intriguing to consider that the fact that when the stars completely fade out, I mean, it's probably a very, very slow change, but once they completely fade out, isn't the world going to be totally black? His nights would be black, right? No starlight, no moonlight. They're sort of relying on the starlight right now, so that brings in another concept as well, and a sort of threat to sort of deal with before something terrible happens. And I mean, I'm drawing a blank of any other lists of great deeds to add here, so I'll probably have a little browse of TV tropes and writing prompts lists and see if I can get inspired, because Save a City and Cure a Plague are like very obvious ones that come to mind that are world changing, and it's a lot harder to think of other heroic acts. I'm going to actually change this to heroic acts. I think it feels like a better deal. And well, one thing is interesting, the amount of time the plague lasted. Like the first thing that comes to mind, if a plague or disaster lasts this long, that ain't natural. To some degree it can be artificial, created by magic or enhanced by magic. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'd say with this plague, this ancient plague, we could be flexible in what it is. It could be literally anything, like something like that's a disease perhaps. If we look at this character, they're a healer. I think they're a herbalist. I think there's discussion about them being like into herbalism, and that would have really made them link in well with the Finch character, who's a herbalist, and in Everbloom Forest as well, and it gives her a bit of a connection to exploring this god. Because one thing that I'm very into, and in fact I'm going to add this to the list, where is it now that we mention it, connections with characters living today. I'm going to say NPCs / characters living today. Because, you know, the whole point of this is making it linking with the present day and in-game story, right, and the characters that are alive now. So having people link with these guys, like giving them a parallel or connection, is really cool, I think. And I think we sort of set that in stone a bit last stream with Violet being a parallel to the elf vampire guy, because his story and his history is going to parallel her story of today. Violet's story, for those that don't know, Violet's a vampire. We talked about Violet's arc in a bit more depth several weeks ago when we did a character arc stream. We sort of realised that her story is going to be about being a vampire that is trying to fight her thirst and develop self-control, because we can get that character arc a bit up more, so we can go into a bit more depth of that in a bit. But basically, it's gonna link because this guy's is going to have gone through the same struggle. We've given him the moderation virtue, which basically stands for having tons of self-control and willpower, and not giving into pleasures and all that kind of thing. And for someone like that to end up a vampire is an absolute nightmare, because it's going against everything they stand for, and it would have been a real fight. And maybe there's diaries scattered about, or older books of the times gone by that sort of give the stories recorded of this elf struggle. And I like the idea of him being a secret vampire that the people of today don't realise he ended up being that way, because he ended up holding it. His self-control was so good, and in things like that he never came to light what he was, but the little clues scattered about that give evidence to him being a vampire without fully spelling it out. And then, like, it could really be a positive inspiration for Violet's character arc to see that such a legend went through something that she's going through today. So that's why we've put Violet in now and there. And also Daniel, because Daniel is a vampire too, but just one who is less feral than Violet. He's a little bit more of a civilised vampire. But both of them, I'm sure, could be impacted by this particular character's arc. I'm going to catch up with chat because I'm doing rambles as I do. And wonder how building up the Fey magic users and flipping your narrative would play out for the individual character growth. I'm intrigued, but feel free to expand on what you say. My brain's done a bit of a brain melt reading that one, but I'll reread it after potentially. Sometimes I don't always know what you guys are going on about, because it's a lot to take in. And but then I realised when I watch the VOD after, I get it afterwards. It can be streaming at the same time as a challenge. Hi Chum, how you doing? It's good to see you. To be honest, I think about how human lifespans got longer due to over time due to medicine, but Fey lifespans could have withered away due to magic uses, and this can even be explained biologically. As just an example, if a man slept with a Fey and there was a child, we've continued only breeding with Feys. Technically part of genetics of the human will be passing it, could be of a shortened life. Yeah, I think lifespans in themselves, and considering sort of ways people could have tried to overcome, like especially humans, I imagine that they would probably do lots of things to try and overcome their lack of lifetime on the planet compared to the other races. And I think that's where the greed comes in as well, because if we look at our timeline, as soon as the age of first men comes about, especially during the age of kings, everything just goes mad. Like the government form, and then the raindrops come about, and you could blame the humans and for the forming of the government and their lust for power for a lot of things that may be going wrong in the world. That's very relatable even for us on this planet, not even in a fantasy world. But I suppose you could see it as they feel desperate because they know they're not here long, and they just want to make even more of an impact while they're still here. And I think you can sort of empathise and sympathise with that. If there's a bad human character out there and you know that they're the weaker race, and taking into consideration these things, it makes them a little bit, it takes away, it gives them a bit of a reason for why they might behave in the way they are, like Traitorio, for example, who is lusting for power. You could say, well, he just wants to make the most of his time here. Anything. Like, I think the whole lifespan thing is really interesting, and thinking of it into more depth in general. I think we could have a whole stream on lifespans and things that are going through humans' minds for how they can manipulate things even. And inventions that could have come out with, and medicines as well. And good evening, how are you doing? Not too bad, Peter. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Avarice and greed, a big human drives forward, so they're 100% would be insane, man, or entire organisation within an empire seeking a cure for their lives. There is even a Chinese emperor who sent his soldiers to find the cure for mortality. Interesting. And now you say that, Storm, we have a civilization here, the second civilization. We have two civilizations which complete blank history on at the moment, folks. These civilizations haven't been developed, and I haven't really thought of any ideas just yet for starting points for them either. But this second civilization was when the humans came into existence. The Kit were around for the first. Maybe the Kit were part of that first civilization, but maybe like that was a big goal of this empire that was around then. Maybe they were looking maybe they just got deeply jealous of the beach races who could live longer when they'd realised they couldn't, so a lot of their civilization might have been based on that. I'm up for ideas because we could have a few, because these civilizations, I suppose you could see them as parallels to the ancient Greeks or ancient Romans, because that's what they're really based on. The civilizations that existed before kings and all that came into power, governments and things, and the medieval times and the modern days as we know them a bit more. But like, we don't have to directly copy the Romans or anyone like that, but we can get inspiration from them and like put our own little twist and things that fit with our world for what they could have done. I mean, for all we know, some of these legends could have been part of those empires, because they were around in the age of first men, so they could easily fit nicely in being part of these civilizations. So I can see us talking about those more, but feel free to give ideas. I mean, Storm's put forward a very good one there, and I can see that potentially being a motive for the second civilization. And that could have further have gone into inspire the monarchy and government that formed in more recent years, because they eventually fell, that civilization, for a reason or another, but certain people would have carried on that legacy and have gone forward. Brett Rule was occupied search for 10 life sent expedition eastern sea through excellent immortality, and then when that was in sex. Interesting, yeah, I'll look into that myself, but thanks for pointing that forward, because it's always good to like have these something to go off, and then it can like spark an idea. Because there was definitely a big question mark about what these civilizations could potentially stand for, but I think that could be something. Sometimes there is some rules emperors which are driven by mad desires up to the point where they force their beliefs to others, and their kingdom slightly falls apart while they are consumed by their madness. Yeah, I'll even do a Google for that myself later, potentially. Early Egypt, China, Africa and Middle East could also be good influences for the old stuff. Yeah, for sure. So even though I say Greeks, ancient Romans, Egyptian, yeah, that's another one, and as you say, so That's great. I think that could link and connect well the whole search for a longer lifespan for this civilization. Ultimately, they'd have failed, but maybe for all we know, at this point in time, humans only lived 40 years. And they did succeed to a degree because they lived up to 80 years now, maybe. I guess it depends how we want to shape it. So, where were we? I forgot where we left off with this. Oh, we was talking about connections with NPCs and characters. So, Violet and Daniel for the vampire one. Oh yeah, for the elven one, that's a healer. An area of expertise, I'm going to put herbalism in as well, and I'm sure they have some magical ways for healing too. And that could be something else they did with them being an elf. It doesn't have to be just traditional herbalism, but I think that ties in very nicely to Everbloom and the sort of themes of Everbloom. As well as the fact that we do have a herbalist who dwells in the Everbloom forest called Finch. She's a herbalist playable character class. So she could be a connection to that one, and she could learn a lot off that particular legend, and the fact that the tree is the monument fits because she's not far from that herself. There might be multiple ones. I'm just coming up with characters that are springing to my mind right now, but there could be others that connect. There's a Fae here who is a mage. We've got Cryas, who is a Fae character, who is a summoner, so they could potentially have a connection with that, be inspired by that Fae character. Even the Emrelease as well. They are an elf, actually a non-binary character, Emreleases, and although they're not a Fae, they're elven, but I could totally see them, with them being a chronomancer and all that, could work well with that, and also the whole non-binary thing works too. Okay, so would planting the tree and starting the first forest itself be a legendary feat? That's a thing as well. Like, obviously around that time we already knew that the tree got planted during the Age of Gods, and I think that's kind of why it just made sense to have the Lightfall tree be the monument of a god during that time. You could even say that it was that god that planted that tree, if we want. Or the people around that followed that legend at that time could have planted that tree, one or the other, and then it would make sense why it's their monument. And it's quite interesting because, as we know, in Everbloom, things are coming to life, things are becoming sentient, right? And Father Maple and the Lightfall tree both end up being able to talk, and everyone's going to freak out and probably think that this god has come to life at first, but really it's not the god. It's just it's tricking them. But I'd say it's interesting because the Lightfall tree, when it talks, when it becomes sentient, is going to be honourable and it is going to be a force of good. Father Maple's the opposite, so and say it's just fortunate that a good sentience came to that tree and not Father Maple. So as for the others, we got a bit of a blank, but the kit one could be Otsu. Just a bit of background on Otsu's character, because they are the one who owns brothels, and they're all about the pleasure. And from that particular profile, although it hasn't been heavily developed just yet, because they're not in the game at the present time, it kind of could fit to because they mention Neckos a lot in the brothels and catgirls and things, so to have them be a kit, even if it's a male one, could connect with that character. Now I'm thinking about it, because the transcendence thing is a question mark, because it's very spiritual, that word is, and it's hard to kind of like think of a more grounded version of that's more ordinary. But I'm kind of seeing it as the transcendence one, somebody that's has an appreciation of beauty and sort of escapes from life almost, and appreciates pleasure and intimacy and humour, because that sort of branches from the transcendence thing on the little thing we looked at the other day. There's a few traits that came off each one of these, so I'm going to actually expand that and put that here actually. How should we word this? We'll say moral message, so we can expand on that further. We'll say virtue they represent. But we'll also add something here called other traits, so we can just further expand on their traits in general, because it can be pretty vague just to see transcendence and be like, well, what's that exactly mean, right? But I think that's an interesting approach for them to be a sort of pleasure god, or the one that doesn't take life too seriously almost, because these ones are very serious. The courage one, you got its justice, they're all very serious gods, and this would be the most modern day god as well, perhaps, because the kit came about afterward, a little bit later. So chances are these two came first and then this one last, maybe. So it's all about just filling in the blanks right now and starting to get a sort of image for their personality and what they stood for. So indeed that would, if the tree is like Mother Willow, from whom the sea scattered and birth rise across the world, yeah, I'd say it's a great, I mean, it could be seen as a great theme, but something that I'm not sure if I'd see it as world changing. I mean, it was definitely something that's gone on to be good, because this tree is now like really looked up to and legendary and people love it. But I think I can see it coming as hand in hand of something that happened for this particular god, that came about as a thing that happened at the same time. I'm not sure any of the other legends would have been involved with that, because yeah, we're gonna also spread it out regionally, so that was another important thing. I like the idea of these gods and the sort of level and where they're worshipped being spread out across the map, rather than have them all, any of them too close together. Although they're globally celebrated, because they are, because the calendar's a global one. Different regions and locations probably celebrate some of them more heavily than others. Like the Haladar one, the mage that raised the Sky City, for example, would be heavily celebrated in the Sky City, or anywhere where, you know, that's probably where their monument is, in all honesty. And this one is Neverbloom, so they're opposite sides of the world, and these ones are probably scattered somewhere else in the other regions, which is, so we'll probably think of that after. It's more important getting their what they stand for in first. Maybe the kit legend used beauty and spiritual insight to bring people together and stabilise the government, presenting a third fall. Interesting. So, stabilising the government's an interesting one. Let's review the timeline then. So this first civilization, that is when the kit came about, as descendants of the kit. So the government itself, like the government we know it of today, didn't form until much after. And so I'm not sure whether it would tie into any of that, but I'm sure even them at the time had their own like little government and empire perhaps. And it's all very vague at the moment, so there's so many gaps to fill in, but I'm up for brainstorming and just throwing ideas around and just thinking about what could work best. But if we get those traits in, that could really help. So if we put in beauty, now the spiritual insight is a question mark for me, because the Khitan isn't quite in touch with magic as elves and fae, so they don't strike me as overly spiritual or compared to those races because of that. I mean, it's hard to, like, the transcendence is meant to stand for spiritualism, isn't it? I guess it's just a funny word for me, and it's hard to kind of think of something that's a little bit more ordinary from that, considering I've been sort of raving about these legends being just normal people, and so it's all very vague there, and obviously I want it to have more depth than just that. But thinking about Tsuyu's character and the whole pleasure house thing, and the fact that she's all in with the cat race, the Neko kit race, I kind of would like her to have at least a connection to that time, but it's very, very vague in my mind what exactly that could have involved in a bit more depth to make them have been involved in something really, really life-changing in that time period. But we'll think about it. Some ideas can come to mind. I mean, what you say, Met could totally work with a little bit more development. Something could be there. We'll move on to the Draw the Justice one. Now this one is pretty straightforward, I think. Justice, the Draw in general don't have equality in this world. We already know that from Everbloom, with the way that they've been treated in that section of the world. They were just thrown out of their home and made to live in caves, and that was only 16 years ago, so it's happening in modern times. But they obviously would have happened in this time for this person as well, and I feel like what better than a reptile race to stand for the justice, virtue and fairness and equality. I do imagine this monument in this region being the desert region for some reason for this one though, because we've had discussions that reptiles would be heavily populated in the desert areas of the world. We know that we do have the forest reptiles in the caves of Everbloom, but considering we've already got the monument there, Everbloom's probably best not to have a reptile monument there as well. We want to spread it out a bit more, which makes it interesting because it also makes us the possibility of the draw of Everbloom worshipping that tree during the time they lived there, and if that gives them a sort of connection to us, because I definitely don't want to just do this by race. I don't want to think of it as, oh, all reptiles must worship the reptile race, or all wolf must worship the wolf one, because I think it's interesting to make it a little bit more complex than that, a multi-race thing. But for sure I imagine it would be they'd more heavily be supported by the same race. But it doesn't mean it's impossible for, say, a reptile to sort of follow an elf god instead of their own, if they're regionally based in that area, perhaps. But that's thoughts. So we'll get some of these traits in first and moral messages, I'd say, and we can just start filling things out. And I think when we started filling these out and start getting an idea for what they stand for, it might start getting some ideas flowing, and perhaps we can come up with some even more acts of greatness for each of them. So I'm just trying to think through any more other titles to add. Don't think so right now. So sacrifice would be a big one for that one, I'd say. I've spelled that completely wrong, haven't I? Because I mean, courage is the primary virtue, but sacrifice, if they did that, there's a chance they probably lost their life doing that. I think that creates more impact. So okay, so we'll say this: their heroic act took their life. It makes their deed, act of greatness, even more like, whoa. And it fits with the courage thing. And looking at that, because I do have that chart up that we looked at last week with all the virtues on it, so I'm kind of nicking a few traits off that too. If anyone finds any more virtue related stuff, feel free to pop them in chat though, because we don't have to rigidly be tied to these ones. You see, I'm already thinking of slightly adapting the transcendence one to something that's a slightly bit less spiritual and making it more of a pleasure god. And I guess that sort of links because of the whole appreciation of beauty and things, but maybe not exactly. And they need to have done something good as well. They can't just be all about pleasure and that'll be all they stand for, if we were to go for that. So sacrifice, zest, which I believe zest is like, you know, very lively and a strong, lively personality, if that's the case, which really works well with the whole holiday thing, because day of enjoyment and liveliness, and we're getting the sort of connections there as well. So it's probably a good idea to think of this Haladar character as someone that doesn't take themselves too seriously, perhaps a bit of a jokester, because then that nicely sort of represents the holiday aspect of the day of the week well with them. But at the same time, being a bit of jokesters is still, you know, they're not a complete joke. They've done like great things of sacrifice themselves. And obviously there's bravery, but that's basically courage anyway, but we'll just stick it in. Well, what's going on? Why is it over here? Moral message. Yeah, that's just a potential expansion of their virtue. Like we can write an entire sentence there if we want of what they stand for. Oops. I'm accidentally crossing off tabs I shouldn't. Now, the moderation vampire one. Self-control. We knew that one anyway. Prudence was another one that the chart says. Forgiveness was another. Well, like I say, these are up for adapting. These are just starting points for these characters and what they could represent. If we feel we need to adjust some to fit better with the potential story, then so be it. But as long as they're diverse and none of them are too similar to one another. Now, okay, so this one was definitely a little bit more vague in what they are. I did stick them in the humanity bracket because that's a really great virtue. I mean, it's one that is in the game, in our moral system anyway. The bravery, good, and wisdom are the three on the scale that you can build your hero around. So obviously it's an essential one to have for one of our legends. And out of them all, it just honestly fit for the dog race to be that good one, mainly because dogs are awesome, right, and really loyal. So we could put some things in like love, kindness, belonging, service even. There was thoughts about them being something that put service into place last stream, I believe. Like workers and all that kind of thing. But I mean, that can be seen as a positive thing maybe, but negative if it's slave labour. But if they were for humanity, they wouldn't have done that. But service, dog, and that, it all connects, doesn't it? Like, I guess you could see it in service as being someone's master as well, in a way that you're a carer. That could stand for that sort of service. I think that'll be enough for that one. For the justice, fairness, equality, freedom, liberation maybe, teamwork, my tummy's doing a big rumble, my goodness. Back to the transcendence one. I'm going to look just for some other definitions of that so we can get something that's a little bit less tricky. Because every definition of that is like so mystical and superior, heavenly, divine. It's very, very spiritual, the like real meaning of that word is. So I'm trying to put a twist on it so that we can change into something that's like about hope and beauty for more of a less spiritual thing of that. basically what Otsuyu stands for, I guess, in her character. Being someone who invented the brothels, pleasure houses. There's someone who would have had to have made life a lot more less. Someone who's made life a bit more liberal, I guess, because we look at these, like this guy, this vampire elf was like the opposite of that. He was more like prude. And I'm not getting like, I mean, this one's definitely quite liberal, but in a different way. That's more about the equality in terms of who you are, your race, your class. In fact, I'd say that one's like more about equality in terms of race, and that one might be about equality in terms of class. And that one about equality, more liberal in terms of like the good things in life, like luxury and relaxation time, and not like just living for the man and service. So, these three here, I mean, funny enough, I'm looking at both the modern legends here with these three, and I'm kind of just seeing here potential ways they were all good, but in different ways to make the very traditional life slightly more liberal and fair. And that was what they stood for, perhaps. I do like the idea of the kit legend being somewhat spiritual despite having less magic power. Yeah, I mean, we can put a spiritual spin on it. I still would like to keep the transcendence as a virtue for that one, because I think it's cool to follow that model. But I'm just trying to think of how to fit that in without it being too unrelatable. I like the thought of these guys just being people that could just be anybody, but like did something great in the moment, I made it, got my first shot of vaccine. Yay, that's so good, Van. I'm so happy for you. Yeah, Van wasn't able to make it to the stream earlier because they had their vaccine, which is great news. Mine should be coming up soon, I hope. I'm in the under 40 bracket, so that I don't think we're quite yet. Some people have had it in the under 40, but they have, they have a health condition, so of course they have to go first. Totally right. And good, congrats, yay! I just made it to get my second shot in 4 days. Yeah, I'm so happy for you guys. That's so good. It's really good to just see that everyone's starting to have it now. We can all be back to normal soon, hopefully. And I'm not sure why they had appointments, because there was a line and no one asked. The age brackets have gone away. Well, that's kind of good as well, because then you can just have it done, which is always good. We're doing it a little bit more controlled here, I guess, but I'm just being patient, and because I'm a hermit anyway, it's no big deal to me when I have mine. But just so you know, Zoe, Van, and anyone else who's just popping in, what we've been doing today, we've just been carrying on with our Pantheon from last stream and just filling in more boxes so we can get more clue on these characters. I've filled in the Act of Greatness for Halidar and for Yorasa, the curing of the plagues, because we came to the conclusion, I've made a list of, there's not really many yet, but I'm trying to make a list of heroic acts that are world changing, like absolutely wow, these guys change the world. And obviously Save a City and Cure a Plague are two that come top right. I want to have a little browse of any writing prompts or TV tropes ideas that could maybe give me a bit more idea for other heroic acts, because I'm drawing a bit of a blank right now. But if anyone in chat has any thoughts for heroic acts that are not saving a city or curing a plague, something that's a little bit more, like something else that's equally as awesome but not the same, then feel free to drop any, because we might we might think they're perfect for the other gods, and we can come up with a story and great deed that they did for their character. But right now we're sort of figuring out who they are as people, what traits they have and what they stand for, because I think it's going to be a lot easier to think of a story of what they did in their time here when we know who they are. So we're getting them in here, and the one that we've come a bit more stuck with is the transcendence one that we're representing. And I've said we don't have to be rigid and follow the model exactly and have transcendence as what they are, because that's a little bit spiritual, and I'm kind of finding a bit of a challenge to make this one spiritual, especially with them being of the kit race. But I want to keep that ordinariness and down to earthness about them still there, and make them more like ordinary folk who did something really selfless and like awesome during their lifetime on the planet. But I mean, we've already, let's get the wisdom one in first before we chat a bit more about them. So, looking at the chart that we had, let me just see if perceptive was a great one for that one. I can't spell it. I've got to look at the image to remind myself how that was spelled. Perceptive. Blank. Perception, should I say? Knowledge, dedication, and but this one, yeah, quiet. Like they're very more isolated type, which I think very much fits for the Everbloom area. So let's get that. So we're getting some ideas here. Basically, these two are parallel opposites. The two from the Age of the Gods. Both did great things. One saved a city and one killed the plague. But their personalities are like opposite ends of the scales. This one's probably much more calmer. And this one's more lively. Which is interesting if we look here, because this one's the day of rest and healing, which fits for the calmness. And this one's the day of holiday and enjoyment, which fits with the liveliness and fun. So I'm liking that we're making that connection with these two for the day. Whereas obviously we're a bit more question mark for the day, what the day could represent for these ones right now, but I'm sure it'll come to us as we start to fill in their traits a little bit more and their acts of greatness. But one thing we know, especially with these three I'm looking at, because these ones were the ones that were alive during the Age of the First Men, probably many centuries apart though, because these ones wouldn't have lived for centuries like the elves and fae would have at these times. These ones would have just lived 150 years. So their chances are that we're from different times in that age. But looking at them, I'm going to catch up with chat in a sec. I want to see what you guys have said. But looking at them, they could stand for very positive, progressive changes, but in different ways. Like this one's more of the progressive change of fairness and equality with race. With them being a draw, it would make sense that they would stand for that, and it would parallel with what the reptiles are going through in Everbloom quite nicely, with the whole not being oppressed and not treated fairly. If we went for some justice, fairness, equality with the draw female legend. And this one here is like maybe more about class issues and equality for class. I could see that being, because it's nice to make them different and stand for different things. Like one be more about the race, fairness, one about the class. Especially because we got the service thing here, which you could see that as maybe making things better for the workers, or even just helping people who deserve it more, that are not so privileged, with the whole love, kindness thing in humanity. I think that could work. Now this one was the interesting one because the transcendence definition was an unusual one, but I've kind of tried to put a spin on it and see them as a sort of parallel to Otsui's character, who owns the brothels, and see them as someone who's more about bringing the fun times in life and the less serious legend, and with them being the more modern legend out of all the 6, having the one that doesn't take themselves as seriously maybe fits in with the kit race quite well, and the whole pleasure seeking. And because at the end of the day, it's not all about work, and it's not all about being a hero and doing things that just work you around the clock. So the whole that side of thing is an interesting thing to explore as well, and I think it's very different from all the others, so I'm kind of thinking of going in that direction with that one. But obviously the transcendence is a question mark unless we still add some of that into it. I mean, escapism is an interesting thought that's come to mind, like if we want to link some sort of spiritualism in with it, or with the whole pleasure thing, I don't know, like sort of wanting to, that's something we can all relate to, right? Escapism, like escaping from the world and all the awful things happening. Maybe this person sort of help people escape from their brutal lifestyles somewhat, and that could link in with their great deed. Just early thoughts here. Even though some could see that as bad, it could work. So let's catch up with chat. Second shot in April, GG. It was strict. Long wait down, that's good. I'm glad that you guys have had it, that's a real relief. I'll let you know when I have mine as well, everyone. Scholarly and inquisitive. Yeah, where do you think those ones should fall, Xavier? Which one do you think suits that? So feel free to give thoughts, because I've had a little, these are like early ideas, like a base, a foundation for these ones. But we do have a bit more idea with these, the 2 at the end, the 2 rest day, holiday day ones. They're doing very well, and I like how they really link with the day of the week, because I think I really want to try my best to make sure everyone links what they stood for, links with the way that what the day of the week represents on the calendar as well. I think it's nice to really tie that in. It's a challenge, so and also Xavier and Van and anyone who's just popped in, I also went through the new timeline with everyone as well, and added a section here with the lifespans. Plan lifespans in order, and who lives the longest and who lives the shortest. And chat, we're surprised about the humans living the least, and in a good way though, I believe, from how you guys sort of reacted, because it's unusual and different, and it allows for interesting themes with human characters, especially us being the protagonist that plays as a human being, the weaker one in this world. And so it's an interesting one for sure. And we can have a stream on that, like dedicated to just that, and a stream dedicated to magic as well. I've added magic and the races, each of them in depth, as world building topics of discussion, perhaps for next week, or very, very shortly, not coming up in the next couple of streams. And we're just filling this in. So area of expertise, I've sort of seen herbalism, as for that one. A little bit more of a blank on what the others could have done, but we'll fill in their traits first. To get some more ideas for areas of expertise, and we've got this here, like loyalty and servitude, luck and fortune, nature, looking at ones that pop out to me that could fit with who we have. Health and diseases. The health and diseases one would fit in with the herbalist guy as well, considering they've cured a plague. So we can always stick that one there for him. Craft is a very interesting one. Craft, costumes, and all these leisure time ones. This is why I think I was drawn to making the kit one more about the leisure, because it feels like we're missing that leisure one. So craft, arts, craft, leisure, and entertainment, and like all the brothels and all that would have come from that and sort of inspired that way of life a bit. Maybe something terrible was happening then and there was an empire around and people wanted to escape from it, who knows, and this person just helped with that. Let's look at a few more. Loyalty, like obviously when I think of loyalty I think of the doggo ones, so loyalty and servitude, but I want to think of it from a class point of view, I think, as well, but there could be other things that this one could have stood for, but these are the first things that come into mind. Because servitude and loyalty is something I don't personally stand for, because it's like rigid and it's like you've got to honour me and do your duty, and I actually think the dog should be more about everybody, no matter who you are, should be given the same fair treatment, and maybe like they help, that sort of thing. But maybe there was a twist on what they were and someone turned it into them being more of a servitude thing. Because we're going to have a section for, let's add that as a section actually. Ways they have been tweaked and twisted by cultures. So if like there's like opposite and contrasting ideas that we can come up with for what they can stand for, we could see one as the truth, the actual thing that is the truth about them, that they were, and then we could always put one in the tweaked and twisted section if we like the idea of still exploring another theme with some of them. And I've already started making connections with these gods with the NPCs that live today as well. So, and let's catch up with chat. My goodness, guys, the healer. Okay, so thank you for giving those, Zava. I think they fit with the character that's being built here. Scholarly for sure is something that definitely gives me the vibes for them, and inquisitive, to be honest, and perceptions, yeah. And if we look at the Age of Stars, we could work on the vampire elf's feats, since it might be easier to figure out the feats in chronological order. Yes, that's probably good. In fact, it's probably ideal to do the vampire now, because I already have a couple of thoughts in mind about that one, which I'm going to share with you in a sec. Let's catch up with chat first. Since that way each of the context of what needed came before, yeah, so we'll do that first and then we can work on the last three. I was sort of filling in their areas of expertise, but we can focus on that once we got the vampire down. Seeing as there's a couple of thoughts that were important to raise about vampires today, which I haven't done yet, so we'll do that in a sec. And I think how it does area of expertise is probably magic, and for Kit, I think you could probably add prophecy with transcendence. Yeah, the prophecy one is an interesting one, and for sure, like we can add that because we've got hope there, and maybe there was a prophecy and that sort of like that could be linked to this as well in some way, that links with what they stand for, and we'll think about it. It's definitely a bit more of a mystery, that one, but all I know is I definitely wanted a legend that was more about celebrating the hobbies and leisure times and pleasures of life, rather than, because that contrasts very nicely with all the more serious ones. Okay, so vampire. Should we look at vampire in a sec? But let's just fill those in that Vance is, just so we don't completely forget. Magic, which obviously works because mage, and that's probably how they were able to raise the Sky City in the first place. I think what better race than Fae and Elves to represent magic, really? I mean, they're kind of the ones most in tune with magic in this world now. Crow, how are you doing? It's good to see you. I hope you're well. Maybe more initially friendship and helpfulness instead of loyalty and servitude. Yeah, should we get them in as well? Friendship. Oh no, not in the moderation one. What am I doing? Friendship. Serve. Helpfulness. And I'm going to put loyalty and servitude in brackets, because I think it's interesting to explore that with the dog god, but perhaps it wasn't. It was something that was twisted as a way. It was probably twisted by people who lived in that time, the time of the Empire, to make people work for them and serve them as a way for them to gain power, and they manipulated what that god stood for, perhaps, when really it was only ever about that. Who knows? That's just the first thoughts. It's whatever's going to tie in best and work with the story. But when I think of the dog race, I mean, we're going to have an in-depth race discussion of each of them next week, where we actually build their lore Bible profiles as races individually, and I think it's a good idea to sort of think of the common traits that represent the races, even though it's not good to put them into boxes, and not everyone is the same in each race, definitely not. There probably was some common traits that they developed, especially in the early days of their culture. So all this, what we're going to put here, is going to help inspire what each of these races were alike. And at the moment, it's seeming like the dogs could be more standing for the being helpful and the friendship and the love and the loyalty, and the cats, the kit and the kicker, are more about the maybe they're the slightly more selfish species, like, whereas the dogs aren't. But like I say, doesn't mean they're all like that. There could be cats or dogs that are actually very different to traditionally what their race stands for. But that's sort of say. Let's catch up, because you guys have said a few things since I've added those two to that. And you could also add charity to the Walkers one. Yeah, so I mean, we'll actually put loyalty on this one. I think it makes more sense as a trait rather than an area of expertise, and we've already got service in there. Maybe in charity for expertise is probably good. So there we go. Yeah, so that's good, because isn't that one of the 7 holy virtues as well, charity? So I'm glad we've got that one in. And then, you know, it's interesting to see how they're so different to the cats with what we're forming here. Alright, so Xavier said something. So he may be the kit's great act of service was crafting something so amazing, inspiring that changed the world. Could have been a weapon too, perhaps that helped win a war, and could be some Pantheon tension with that potentially. It's definitely interesting to explore the arts and crafts side of things with one of the legends, especially as we've got such epic acts and more warrior, fighter soldier kind of deeds with some of the others, such as Haladar here with his sacrifice, or well, they, with them being not a non-binary one. So, I mean, I'm intrigued to explore something that's unique with that one, with how they could have made a difference. But that's definitely a good point of consideration, the standpoint that they crafted something that's really been memorable, or it doesn't necessarily have to be something that was linked to war. We could separate the whole what they did from the war aspect side of things if we want to just do something a little bit different with them. With the whole escapism thing and the pleasure thing, maybe they would have completely avoided war at all costs and have just only have enjoyed the good side of life. But maybe their prophecy, maybe there was a prophecy that made them avoid war and go into this escapism mode, perhaps, potentially. But maybe something they did though was life-changing in regards to arts and craft, could be something linked to entertainment, or something of enjoyment that people still appreciate today to a great deal. Like, you know, who knows, could be anything. But yeah, there's still the female dryads about justice and equality, and I imagine they could have been very heavily involved in war because of what they are, equality for the people and things, and probably very likely was around in the desert zone, I'd say, if that was heavily draw populated. And let's catch up with chat. Look at all those raindrops, folks. A bagel. You know what I want now? A bagel with salmon on it. I love that. I'm hungry now. So what's the difference between a kit and a Kit Kat? Right, so this is a very new development. It's only happened in this week, the change of the race names. They used to be called Feline and Neko, but we wanted to kind of be a little bit just more inspiring and not just attach ourselves to common names that it currently exists. Like Neko is a very popular Japanese term for cat race, but this way we're sort of creating our own and putting a unique spin on the races ourselves. So this is kind of how the races are looking to shape, and the Kit are the descendants from the Kit Kat. They're just less furry. They're still cat people, but they're sort of got a more human-like appearance now. And Met did raise an interesting question earlier in stream. Are humans descendants of the Kit, if Kit are descendants from the Kit Kat? Which I was like, perhaps. I mean, they're the ones who developed human form, other than the ears, which they took from the Kit Kat. But so it's possible that they could have, considering in the timeline we got the humans coming after them, and it all follows this one after the other thing. But humans could have also been a race that sort of were just a bit of everybody, and this the scraps, in other words. It sounds bad to say, but just you know what I mean. It's something to speculate for sure, because both could work. But I also find it interesting to not attach them too heavily to the Kit either, although I definitely think they're most like the Kit out of any race that are around, perhaps. Let's catch up with chat. So maybe I missed this. Oh yeah, I've already read that bit. Rose, can we find this spreadsheet anywhere, by the way? Not quite yet. No, this is only viewable for me at the moment. I haven't shared it, but I could pop it into the Discord for you guys after stream, so you can have a little look over the weekend before next stream. In fact, I might do that later after I've had my dinner. I might pop that in the ideas discussion channel for you guys to sort of have a look over if you have any thoughts. And because this will all eventually go into the Law Bible, it'll have its own page, and that's available on the web for everyone to see, linked off our website. So it'll have its own page like our calendar does, for example, eventually. But in the meantime, while we're still setting things in stone, it's definitely easier to just put rough ideas on here. And then once we're happy with it and we know that we've got everything we want for them, we can make the page then. This timeline will be going into the Law Bible very soon, this one we've got here, because this is like basically set in stone now. And Kit goes, pure feline. Kit decided for Kit Kat, make one a stone. You never know. I mean, I know you was trolling, but our game is kind of a little bit like that to some aspects. I've already sort of said that Carol the Barrel there's a chance that she could have herbs put inside her, and she could have side effects from that for laughs, because barrels are affected with what's put in them in this world. And you might want to add industry to the kit. All right, that's an interesting one as well, especially if we're going down the more craft route for this legend, and that's an interesting way to potentially shape them as the one that started that too. But I definitely just like them not being serious, like away from the war-torn side of things and more for the beauty of life and the pleasures and just enjoying their life. And perhaps there was a prophecy that said you must keep away from violence and war, and there maybe, something was spiritual happened that made them go that way, who knows, but I just definitely am fond of the idea of having that less serious legend. I think that would connect well with the kit and what they are like as cat folk, and the fact they're a little bit of a trickery people, devious. We've already got a kit in the game that's a con person and a thief. Lavender Sun Song. So some immoral stuff could have stemmed from that sort of attitude for sure along the way. I like having connections. So in fact, I'm actually going to put Lavender as an NPC that's connected to this god, because if Lavender, who is a cat girl, is a con woman and thief, which they are, it could have been this god that influenced that, but they twisted it into something they really didn't stand for deep down. But people like that, thieves of today and con people of today, maybe were sort of took that god's moral message and turned it into that for their own, as an excuse, who knows. And hi Looking Glasses, how are you doing? And let's catch up. Oh my goodness guys, you've said so much and I'm behind. I'll catch up for sure though. I can't spell either today. Architecture. And Xavier said inventions and technology. That's, something to consider for sure. So absolutely no chance any of the others could have been more sciencey. What do you reckon, folks? Looking at it, none of the others fit somebody who could have been part of science. If this dog one, the wolf, is more about friendship and charity, then that doesn't really fit with science. And the whole justice one could fit with science, might not. I'm thinking which, if any others could take that one, so we don't pop too much in that same one. But I definitely think it's a good one to mention. Technology and science, I think it does make sense actually with this one now you think about it, because it is the more modern legend. The kit legend is the one that was around the latest to the recent times. So if anyone's going to invent technology and science, it would probably be the one that was around more recently or started to invent that. or maybe none of them did. Maybe technology and science formed at a later date, or is still forming today. We haven't really thought actually of what level of technology the world is in, so maybe they didn't go quite that far, but people of today are sort of carrying on that legacy, who knows. And make the drawer a judge, right, so judge, where should that go? Trying to think of the best part. I suppose popping it here. Does that work? Is the structure of that word, does it fit with the others? That's what I'm wondering, if it just needs a slight reword. And would there be a wall or walk to be more human? What do you mean, Ziva? Would there be one to be more human? Do you mean in regards to this one here, or do you mean races in general? But yes, nobody's really I think you mean, is anyone a descendant from the walker, like there is the kit from the kit car? There actually isn't, but I think that's because we don't want to overload ourselves with too many races, because we've already got 7, and nobody's is a descendant from the draw either. Dragons are their ancestors, but nobody's come after the draw then. But there could be a bit of lore or reason of how the kit came from the kicker and why there's none from the draw or walker. That's something to consider for sure. Because we don't want to say the humans came from Walkerby, because then that puts kits and humans on an equal level, and no, the kit are definitely more superior to the humans. Humans are the weakest race. Okay, so, and yeah, humans being hybrid of all races, or at least out of all of them, but draw makes sense, and then all the fancy traits could cancel. Yes, and Met saying that is an interesting thought actually, if they're hybrids of all the races and just the bits of all, but except for reptiles, because then that gives more basis for why the humans just don't connect with the reptile community at all, and why there's this conflict at the start of the game, because there's no draw in them at all. There's just 0 draw, but maybe they have a bit of walker or a bit of kit in kicker and elf and that and fae in them in other ways. And having different beliefs and traditions about where each race comes from is always fascinating. I agree, Looking Glasses, it's really, really being good, I think, to go really into depth with this. It's the first time we've truly given time to the races and actually discuss them in detail and their histories and how they came about. And I think that is so important, because it was generic at first. Like when we all started this, we knew we had these races. We had the reptiles, we had the canines, the felines, the neko, and all your typical diverse fantasy races, but there was never any real depth behind any of them. So this is really good, because it's just going to make the world just seem like real and like there was life that existed before the hero entered the game, and all this history. So it's super good. And it would be great if you could share for someone like that's behind on the progress of the game as a quick summary for ideas that have been put into the game. So yeah, I'll definitely put it in the Discord, Forgotten. I'll pop it into Ideas channel here. Where is it? In Ideas discussion on the Discord. So if anyone wants to join, folks, that isn't in the Discord yet, I'm just put it in chat for everyone. Feel free to join, because we sometimes have chats on there in here. And I will share it in there simply because it's probably better to share it just with the community rather than make it public for everyone at this point in time. Not that it really matters, because it's all public on the Lore Bible anyway. Yes, it's all unfinished right now, but I'll pop it in, and it will update in real time when I share the link anyway. I could do it now, but I always get nervous about clicking that in case my private email address is show. Let me hide this. So get link, copy link. Anyone with links, so copy link. There we go, I've done that now. 2-second job. Here is the spreadsheet of our Pantheon for so far, if anyone wants a peek. There you go. And let me know if that works, if anyone wants to click on that and have a browse. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad you've suggested it, Forgotten, because something like that is just easier for you all, because it can be difficult to see everything all at once on the screen, even though I've tried my best to fit everyone's names in, all the 6 legends together. You know, some of you might want to scroll down and look when I'm not scrolling. So, and being a legend would be great. I know, right? It would be. And maybe the kit legend made a safe haven for the refugees. Yeah, that's actually really cool, because it's hard to think of a great heroic act that someone who's a bit more selfish and into the pleasures would have done. But seeing it from that perspective, making a safe haven, and that safe haven is like a haven of escapism and entertainment and crafts and arts and all that thing. Maybe there was plays and theatre going on and loads of dancing. You know, that would really be very beneficial for people who are going through a tough time. If there's war happening and loads of horrible things happening in the world, that's an escapism from that, and something I think people would appreciate. And maybe especially if there was people getting killed and that, and this would have saved their lives, you could see that as something that would have saved them. So I think that's definitely something to consider. I'm going to read through chat as well, because I see you guys have said something, but we'll potentially get that in a sec. And I guess whoever does end up being the invention god will be the one my character is allied with. Yes, Matt. And now you've mentioned your cat, I was thinking at some point, perhaps when we need a breather from this whole world building and just need to let it all sink in, if we get a bit of writer's block, we can make your character then, get their sprite done and get them on the stream avatars. So I'm sure at some point we'll get a bit of writer's block and we'll need a break. And good day, Rez. I'm okay. How you doing? I'm doing great, Looking Glasses. I'm having a good day today. But the invention one's interesting. I'm still a question mark on whether it should be the kit, because I don't want to lump too much on the same god, especially when we're a bit empty on some of the others. But it's more, at the moment, it kind of fits as more likely, but we'll see. And I mean, healer could be science in a way, biologically. Yeah, for sure. I mean, because they're so old, they were the first god along with this one. It's hard to imagine that any form of technology or invention would have been in existence then. But they for sure would have, when it comes to disease and, I mean, health and disease is essential for this one. An illness, and because of the plague, for one, the fact if we're going to have their greatest act of greatness be a plague, it only makes sense that they're the one that represents health and disease and medicine in general, right? Even though it's more old school, it would have really helped a lot of people in that time who probably might have, disease would have been a really big issue back then, especially if there was a plague. So I've plopped them in for that one. Well, scholars could work with science. Magic could be of a similar spirit of technology, because it's about making things with how you work. So yeah, we'll keep a question mark on the technology and invention at the moment, but it could be the kit. There still might be a place for it there, unless we want to link it into the Justice one, but I don't even think it's relevant for the draw. So, but we got the vampire guy, like they've done something good. We've got a complete blank on them. You know, that, I mean, what they represent is prudence and self-control and modesty, mainly because the reason why they represent those traits and why we decided to give moderation to this one is because of the struggle of being a vampire it would be for someone like that. The hunger, the thirst for blood, having to keep that self-control and the secret of being a vampire hidden away would have been a nightmare for someone who has a lot of modesty and self-control and was admired for those traits. Whereas someone like the Kit, who is all about pleasure, it wouldn't have been as big a deal if they became a vampire, because they'd have probably just given into the thirst without any worries or inner conflicts. It's the inner conflict of that makes that interesting, the moderation. But in terms of what their area of expertise was, that's where I draw a bit of a blank with that one. But they had to have done something. But because they were around during the natural disaster of the Age of Stars, and that was when they got cursed, it could tie into that. So we'll see what we think, but we need to get this act of greatness for the vampire, because it's been on the agenda for a while. But I wanted to just update you on some thoughts about vampirism in this world, folks. One sec, I see that time's running out and I don't want it to, because I want this stream to go on forever, but I'll stream until my dinner's ready. Let's catch up with chat before I go into this in too much detail, though, because I want to make sure everyone has had, I've listened to what everyone's said. And they could have all had a hand in science since it's too broad of a subject. Yeah, if we struggle, we could do something like that where it was a broad thing and they all did each their own bit in a different way. I mean, the one that's about charity could have helped science in some way, and this one could have helped science in another. But let's not forget, the world might not be too advanced with science just yet, but there's probably definitely people working on inventions and technology, but it might have not got off its feet just yet because of this being a medieval age. But I say it's medieval, but it's only Everbloom and the Highlands area that has the medieval setting. I know that further on down to the west, where we have the urban city, there could be much more industry over there. So it's not a complete no-no to have technology at all. And so the Drow should have the court system too, and Drow might have politics under it. That is fantastic. So politics, judge, court system. Yes, for sure. Someone would have had to have maybe created that, and who better than to give it to that legend. I think it was ideal to have the one that's all about equality and fairness and freedom to the reptile one, and I like that we've made them a female as well. That's definitely a strong character, and it makes the Drow respectable, and it fits in and parallels well with what's happening with the reptile conflict as well in episode 1. And I'm sure that's something that happens globally to reptiles, to be honest. The Kitco's kit, would Walker be a walk? Maybe. I mean, now that you mention that, Xavier, I mean, something I did ignore is that there is a branch off the Walker called Wolverkin, which is a sort of werewolf, half human, half wolf. But that's not part of the race selection. We sort of only got these main 7 as a race actual that you can be, because they're the most populated in the world. But they could easily be these sub-races that come off them that were hybrids of other races or have special magical properties, like vampires, the Wolverkin, the one that Storm Eagle's character is, that there could be sub-races, but they're very rare. There's like 1 or 2 in the world, or a group of them in the world at most. I'd say the Wolverkin, there's probably only a small tribe of them, looking at John the Druid's profile. So that is, I guess you could say, a sub-race of them, and they do have the half human, half wolf properties, so they could parallel the kit in a way, I guess you could say, if we want to look at it like that. And oh gosh, I see you guys are coming up with more. You're all awesome. And draw could have community, civilization, organisation, structure there. They're great too. So I'll remove the judge just because that kind of comes in for court system. I mean, community could come in with the dog one as well, especially when you think of the belonging and loyalty and aspects and the whole friendship thing. So I'm kind of keen to think of that for that. But structure, and organisation, I think it's worthwhile putting them in. But yeah, it's just thinking of which ones would fit more with the dog and which one with the reptile, I guess, which fits more with what each stand for. I see this one as more of a helping the people. Anything that's linked to helping others, class divides. I guess that is still helping the people, but it's more in a race way, like a racial side of things and equality for races. Whereas this one's more equality for class, perhaps, and people who are poor. But they could come hand in hand, but they've got to kind of be different as well. With what they stand for. But I imagine the justice one, the female draw, would be living more in the desert where things are more rough, that part of the world, whereas the walker might live in the civilized cities and more populated places where people actually have jobs and are in more of the... So maybe, I think it's up for consideration with the two and how they could be different. You're welcome, Forgotten, and I see that we've got a anonymous jackalope in here. That's awesome. Feel free to have a browse if you want of what we list in folks. And under vampire, you could add cleanliness. That's a good one too, because when you think about it, someone must have had to have started hygiene. That being important. Nobody had a bath before then, right? In the age of gods, nobody ever bathed. Everything was just so like cavemen. But maybe, that does, not only does it make sense that would have come about at some point, but it fits in with the whole prudence and side of things. I imagine this elven vampire would be really like dapper and really clean shaven and Mr. Perfect with how he holds himself. So becoming a vampire would be like, oh my goodness, for someone like that. And I'll catch up with chat once more. I want to get these aligned, but I don't think it's a big deal for now. Figure moderation specialities would be stuff like research management and diplomacy. Yeah, so as for those, moderation, diplomacy is an interesting one. So that could be part of the whole justice thing, do you reckon? And resource management. I mean, if you're having another thought for where that belongs, feel free to. I mean, that resource management one could go in there for the dog one. Perhaps. I'm kind of split because some of them think, oh yeah, that works for the reptile legend, and then I'm like, it could work for the dog one. So let me just maybe, because if we're in the dog, be more in the city and more around where people are, that's less deserted, like in the desert, then maybe it would fit there with the whole community aspect and charity side of things. Just some thoughts, but very rough at the moment. And if you do that, you can relate this legend with that holiday in Nepal where they said the house needs to be clean and receive the present. Oh yes, we could. And although that was, I think, listed to be a goddess, we can always change it to a male, like a normal god, not a goddess. That is good forward thinking, Van. I'm glad you spotted that, because it is true, there is a god on those holiday polls in the Discord, and one does mention Christmas and cleaning the house. Let's just review what that said. come to think of it. I'm glad you mentioned it, because it was on my agenda, that god, but it really just slipped my mind. So this was the one. Let's just review it. And like we says, these holidays are up for adapting if necessary. So just because it's got this doesn't mean we have to have it exactly word for word like this as our holiday. It's just a template. So a beautiful goddess who often appears as a hideous crime. That's not too necessary. The thing is, we need to adapt it somehow, because every single one of these holidays, most of them are inspired by actual real life traditions and mythology. So if we copied it word for word, it would be just a carbon copy of what that mythology is. So we could just take some of the aspects and have it as, yes, that god who, yeah, beautiful and clean in a man way. It's clean hands, finished work before holiday. Yeah, that's great if it links to that. And he was all about that. It fits with the moderation thing, great. And the whole prudishness. And he seemed strict. For sure, the vampire elf seems strict. But when I think of elves, I definitely think that they've got a stricter nature than some of the other races. That's where I think the elves and fae differ. The elves are more strict and rigid, whereas the fae are more like lively and a little bit rebellious, perhaps. Especially if we look at Halida, they're far more like energetic compared to their polar opposite god who lived at the same time, Yorsa, who is more about being quiet and laid back. But yes, the gift thing is an interesting, because if we're going to make this, it's winning the poll, so we are going to make it very likely our official gift giving tradition. That means we're going to have to link them to Christmas. Well, not Christmas, because we're going to have it our own version of Christmas. We're not going to call it Christmas, we'll call it something else. But it is going to be a gift-giving season. So maybe something about them kind of started up the whole gift-giving side of things, if we're going to link that to the god of Christmas. Okay. Science and technology could go under vampire, then he could have focused on alchemy and technology so he could keep self-control. That's an interesting perspective as well, because let's remember, if he turns into a vampire, he's going to have wanted to cure that in some way, remove the curse, and he'll have tried everything he could have to remove that curse. And it's a big blank at the moment in the game, in the story, of how vampires can kill themselves, because rumours are that there's no cure. For all we know, there might not be one, or there might be. Part of Daniel's arc is investigating the mystery of vampirism and, the curse in general. So thinking of how things like that, thinking ahead of how he could have attempted to cure himself, even if he didn't succeed, is important. It could have created future inventions, perhaps, and help technology, especially because this happened after the natural disaster during the Age of Stars. So any technology created from that point on, when they were a vampire, wouldn't have got destroyed, because that would have been the post-disaster. So as long as it was post-disaster, I think it's possible to have some sort of invention then without it destroying anything. And I see you guys are coming up with so many, which is awesome, but I'm more than likely going to have to fill the rest of them in after stream. I'll be looking through the VOD and adding in more, folks, just so you know. But still feel free to share, because any thoughts you have, it's going to really help. And an act of greatness in Age of Stars could be finding a way to use the stars from some sort of magic that previously required to the moon. Finding a way to use some magic that previously required the moon. Yeah, who knows? That's something worth considering, and stars did come about then, and that's something to think about too, because stars didn't exist in the Age of Gods. They only came about here. So, you know, pay more attention to the stars in general during that time. Could be something even linked to this one, who knows, as well. Telescopes and all that. Navigation maybe could go under the vampire, yeah. And my body is ready for vampire dogs. So you guys are coming up with some thanks, Ava and Met and Van and everyone else for coming up with some really good areas of expertise, folks. And I know I haven't got them all in quite yet because of time. It's already 6:15 here, and we'll be here forever if we add them all, but I will be looking through the VOD, don't worry, folks. And maybe the less magic races from the Owls and Fae, so some modern draw might claim the other races and owe their freedom to the draw. I like that idea. Yeah, I'll think about that one too. Thanks for throwing your ideas in, and although I can't properly take them in just yet because I'm rushing, I can already see there's potential in some of these, and I'm going to read them properly in a bit, and I'll bring them forward because we're having races streams next week, folks. Magic will come first, a magic stream, and then we'll go into talking about the races individually. So anything that's been raised specifically about each of the races, I'll bring up when we have the race streams. The anonymous Jack, like, is it? And I think that the Owls and Fae are pretty clean overall. Maybe the Fae get a bit dirty for the fun. But yeah, I was thinking now, and I was thinking, yeah, no one bathed before the age of stars. They just let themselves be dirty. Fae and Owls are very clean looking Fae, can't they? They're definitely not messy. Maybe they didn't need to, but during you know, maybe as time went by and maybe he just got overly prudish. This guy definitely seems like he would have cared more in general. Maybe too much. Maybe he was too much of a prude, and that could be twisted into something very negative by some people in some cultures, and that's where we've got this horrible fable, Christmas, where he comes and punishes people who don't clean their homes, which is a horrible story. But maybe he didn't stand for anything that evil, really. But people like to make twists of legends so that they can get what they want in life, I suppose, because that's what people are like. So that's why I've got a section here called Ways That They Have Been Twisted by Cultures, because that could have likely have happened too. Which is why I imagine any con men or con artists and thieves would have looked onto the kit legend and saw their safe haven, because I love the idea of the safe haven for the kit. Let me just tell you that I think Met was the one that came up with it, so definitely thinking that they could have turned that idea, that safe haven and pleasure seeking, into something bad, you know. And that's how con men and thieves come about, because they didn't go by the natural structure. Okay, so some interesting topics next week. Yeah, it's going to be fun, folks. It's going to be fun streams. But I think before we end today, it only makes sense we finish this discussion about vampires, because we're about to fill in this act of greatness for the elf vampire. And I'm glad we've got some thoughts on the other three, considering we had nothing about them before. And there's some more that you have already said in chat, folks, that will still go in. And we'll clear them up and make them a bit more sure next week when we talk about the races. We'll probably say we'll have a discussion about dogs, and then we'll talk about the dog legend at the same time as we talk about dogs in general, and same for the kit and same for the draw. We'll talk about the legend as we talk about the race next week. But we'll probably start with magic and then go into races discussion the following stream. We'll see how it goes. But the act of greatness for the vampire, right? So, in regards to the curse itself, we said that it arose during this natural disaster that happened during the Age of Stars, and I think it could work as a magic disruption. Something weird happened during that natural disaster. If you imagine the moon changed orbit and stars appeared and, you know, it went dark, lots of terrible, horrible stuff is going to go down, right? There's going to be messed up magic and weird things would have happened to the planet that would have made people believe it was the end of the world. So because of that, something could have happened, like some sort of wave of magic could have sort of fell and disrupted their body, like it landed on them and it disrupted their system and spread through their body, and that was the point in time they became a vampire. And in regards to Violet and Daniel and any of the vampires around today, there might have been like pockets of magic that settled on the world from that disaster. And if they sort of, Rose being a farmer, like a farm girl, could have easily have dug up something while she was doing her farm activities. Just pure unluckiness, right? She just happened to have touched it or dug it up, and then she got to her. And I know that her profile says that she was cursed by a person, but she doesn't know that for sure. That's just what she thinks. Maybe she saw someone walk past at the time that she turned into a vampire, mistakenly mistook that person being the one that cursed her, because it isn't necessarily a person that cursed her at all. That is just her speculation and thoughts, and it kind of ties in quite well to this natural disaster to make it something like that. It's simple and it's mysterious and it's, so that could have been how they turned into a vampire, that bit either. As for their act of greatness though, that's another thing altogether. The simplest thing I can think of is that people were dying and it was the end of the world and they just did their best to save people. But we could go even deeper in that and link it to more about other things if we wanted, that are more relevant to what they represent and stand for. But we could easily add some other areas of expertise here. Like what would they have done? Were they a good fighter? Because if they did a lot of good during the Age of Stars and saved people, I like Met's idea as well about his act of greatness being linked to the stars and something a bit more sciencey rather than something that's to do with war or saving people, just so we can have it be distinct from what Haladar's act. But it's good to get some thoughts down. I think salvation should go under the vampires. That explains why they're random people that come up with vampirism. Yeah, it does, because vampirism is random in this world. Like Violet got it randomly, Daniel got it randomly, and they're just like, why are we suddenly vampires? And it was random for this guy too, and it obviously has to link to that natural disaster, and putting it down to magic again is a simple way to do it, and it would also give good reason for why vampires are a little bit stronger than normal humans as well, or normal people in general, because Violet, when she was just a farm girl, was probably absolutely useless in battle, couldn't do anything, but being a vampire has definitely given her that aggressive edge and boost of strength that she didn't have before. So putting that down to linking it to the magic could give reason for why they've got an edge as well in terms of strength, right? Salvation. I'm going to just quickly look through some of the words you guys said earlier and add them, because I think I might have a bit more time. But as you could see, the act of greatness, there's a few things few thoughts I've got. I know that the thing about looking at the stars was an interesting one, and the idea of linking that to technology and invention as well, and making them the technology and science person is also a thought. Because they're quite dapper, I think it would fit for them to not be a fighter. I couldn't imagine them with a weapon and giving it as good as they got, with them being someone so prude and modest. So if their skills are going to lie anywhere other than being about being clean, because that's not much, then maybe it links to tech and science. But anyway, I've got to go, everybody. I've got a pizza. So I'm going to head off now. Let's catch up with chat first, though. Maybe that natural disaster from the Age of Stars is random aftershocks, sort of like how earthquakes have aftershocks. Yeah, that's one thing to consider, like how the natural disaster would have affected the planet at that time in general. And we'll probably have an article on the Law Bible just for that at some point as well, that explains stuff that could have happened. And I wonder how forgiveness and salvation could play alongside honouring the earlier two legends by making the stars. Yeah, so any thoughts, guys? If you want to post any initial thoughts from what's been said that we don't have time to discuss now into the ideas discussion, feel free to. And feel free to browse, because this spreadsheet's in the Discord as well. Feel free to browse. And any thoughts that come up, if you get any light bulb moments about each of these, feel free to say, or any light bulb moments for acts of greatness or characters that can connect with, or anything that works, because we haven't quite filled it in just yet, have we? And we got to fill the classes in. We've got mage and healer for these, but we haven't thought what they were good at. Like we said with the elf vampire, well, what would they have done? Because I can't imagine them being a fighter. Maybe their skills lie more in something that's non-combat related. But that's something to think about too, their class as well. And the names of the day, that's the question mark. But like I said, the more we can link it in, their name with what the day stands for, the better. Like with these two, we've already done that. We've made them link really good with what their traits are. And so, for example, someone like this, the Walker, their day could be about the fact that they're about kindness and community and charity somehow, and their name can link to that too. We'll say there's a lot of gaps to fill in, but what we'll do is we'll fill in this and just develop it more on the side next week as we discuss the races in more depth and start to really come up with some really deep history for each of the races. I think if we do that alongside that'll be cool. And we might say, if we say, okay, we'll talk about the reptiles today, the draw, we'll just focus completely on Legend 5 on one stream while we talk about the reptiles. And then we move on to the others another time. Because it probably could be quite valuable to flesh each of them out as individuals now and spend time properly on one at a time, rather than all 6 at the same time. Because we kind of just dip it in to them in bits at the moment, aren't we? We're all over the place. Pizza, I like some of that. Yeah, it's like literally here now, so it can't get cold. So I'm gonna head off. There's not been any trivia or raids because of the rush this week with dinner, and it's not surprising because I always go late when it comes to world building streams because I get really into discussion. I look at the clock and it's 4:30 and then it's 6:30 all of a sudden. TY for the stream, I'm getting excited for the future again. Thanks so much for the kind words and encouragement, Forgotten. I appreciate that. And thanks for streamers. Thanks Looking Glasses. Thanks Xavier. Thanks Thirsty. Thanks Van. Thanks Met. I appreciate you all. You're all awesome with the stuff you come up with. It really is good about the game core because all these ideas is going to create a really vivid and rich world. So it's really exciting, folks, and we've come so far just this week alone. The races have come on significantly since this last week. We're actually developing them, and they're a little bit richer now, and we're going to make them even more next week, so that's going to be fun. So take care, everyone. I appreciate you all. Have an awesome weekend. Bye bye.